Welcome, everybody. I am so excited for this episode of Integrated Practice Success. I'm here with the brilliant Dr. Sam Shay, and we are going to talk about a content framework. As you know, structure equals freedom. How do you make it work? How do you free up your time, buy back your time? We're going to talk about how to have the greatest income and impact while talking topic. And I'm going to ask him to communicate through a framework that's really talking on the subject of addiction. It's really popular topic right now that a lot of people are going through in terms of mental health. People are at home. People are not knowing how to manage emotions right now. So we're going to take that relevant topic and walk through a simple step process that Dr. Sam's created that is helping practitioners really make difference in their world, because marketing and sales is not what doctors like to do, but educating, inspiring, motivating is what can really be the piece that makes the bridge connect here and get out of our heads of we're manipulating or pushing somebody towards an outcome. We are here to make an impact, and you know that. And I have somebody that's making a massive impact. Dr. Sam, welcome, and thank you for the time with us. Tell us a little bit about you and your background, and then we're going to get into the juicy parts of how you put the structure. It's making a big difference in not only your patients' lives, but other practitioners as well.
Thanks, JR. I'm really happy to be here, and I've read your story and just kind of the journey you've been through, and my story has its own arc. A lot of people like myself who end up in particular natural medicine is that we have our own health journey. Mine started when I was 6 with my parents' nuclear divorce, and me and my sisters were caught in that blast radius, and that was a start of 12 years of severe, crippling, mind-numbing insomnia, to the point where it actually stunted my growth. The terrible digestive problems, chronic pain, acute stress, anxiety, depression. I was called a kangaroo in school because I would walk on my toes with my arms bent at 90 degrees. Now I know it's a flexor dominant response to being constantly on the perception of being under threat. But I didn't know that back then. I was just called a kangaroo. And I had 2 addictions I developed starting at age 6. One was video games and one was sugar. And the video games lasted for 25 years and the sugar lasted for 15 years. And I didn't have any kind of overt diagnosis at the time. It was just this diffuse, oh, he's unwell, he's pale, he's not feeling well, he's feeling low. It wasn't like some overt pathology. It was this kind of constellation of general chronic issues. And both my parents, being psychiatrists in the 80s, honestly didn't really know anything about actual health, to be quite plain. And so it was really bad diet. The solutions were put him in front of a shrink and get him medicated, and not really attend to the root issues of what was going on, particularly because there was a lot of humiliation and violence at school that none of the adults in the room, whether it's the teachers, the administration, my parents, or the community, stepped in to intervene. And so it was like a war zone at the house and a war zone at school. There wasn't violence at the house, but there was a lot of supreme amount of emotional tension. And that all, fast forward, as a teenager, I made the decision I have to take control of my own life. I have to choose to get myself healthy. And that's when I found Dr. Jensen's book. He's the famous naturopath and kind of the grandfather of naturopathy in the West. I started doing Brain Gym, which was a body-mind integration technique as a teenager, and then went to college, studied pre-med, did a holistic practitioner degree on weekends and evenings, had a very different college experience. No partying, no drugs, no alcohol, no weed. It was study, joining meditation groups, holistic stuff. And just, I was like, I need to figure out what's wrong with me and to become a natural practitioner. And then just kind of continued on, went to chiropractic school, had at one point a degree in functional neurology, have since moved on to functional medicine with the Institute for Functional Medicine, the Kalish Institute for Functional Medicine, certifications in genetic analysis through FitGenes in Australia, other things, and just became kind of an all one-stop shop for my my clients. And what I learned through the whole journey of trying to heal myself is that I was chasing magic bullets for the first 20 years. You know, oh, this person has this goji berry juice they squirt up their nose, and that helped them. Or this person has this magic exercise technique, or this meditation technique that has, you know, a purple themed imagery versus this other person. Theirs is like violet themed, and that one's crap. You know, it's there's this kind of weird magic bullet competition thing between different parts of health. And when I was working with severely ill patients when I was practicing in New Zealand, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune, hormone imbalance, all of the same person, I realized that there were 10 major pillars of health, 10 of them. And the people who were chronically unwell had a minimum 7 out of 10 that were crumbling, and which explained why the magic bullet therapy didn't work. Because if you're sitting on 7 tacks and you remove one of them, technically you're healthier, but you don't feel any better. And most clinicians, and this may be a bit confronting for me to say, but I'm okay with that, is that most clinicians are really, really good at 1 to 3 pillars, like really, really good, are good at another 3, and really not at the other 4. And so if someone's dealing with 7 plus pillars that are crumbling, then the client patient is experiencing like marginal, not really getting where they want. But as a clinician, you're like, well, all these other people are getting better. Why aren't you? Because those other people had the 1 to 4, 5, 6 pillars that you're really too good at. And so it's like there's room to explain all of it. Like, and why I found that there were 10 is because there were 10. And I certainly had all 10 in spades. And then on top of that, there's addiction, which is a whole layer on top of that. So now what I've done is I've formalized those frameworks, 10 pillars of health, and then my addiction model called Tame the Beast of Addiction. And I'll share those models to illustrate the concept of frameworking and why frameworking is the single most important thing a clinician can do to help their clients and patients, because it will empower your clients to start to think for themselves. It will give them a roadmap. You know, doctor is, I think, old French for teacher. And so having a framework, you'll actually fulfilling your title as doctor, because you'll be able to teach. And more importantly, you'll be able to scale to teach wider. So if you want to like write a book, teach a course, create a mastermind group, whatever, like people need frameworks. And so that's why I realized that I have a knack for creating frameworks. And I kind of deconstructed that to identify the 6 different types of frameworks that are most easily constructed, but particularly for people in the health field. Like everyone's got like the triangle of this, the 6 parts of that, the 10 pillars of that, the inverted rhombus of that, the dodecahedron of whatever. Like everyone's got their framework. And even though some frameworks may feel kind of, they don't resonate with you, they definitely resonate with some people.
Yeah. Can I pause you right there? Because I think, a lot of people listening, I coach a lot of practitioners on here that are pain management, sports and orthopedic. They maybe haven't been online yet, so they're not quite the marketing crowd in group. And I love what you said. Structure equals freedom, because at the end of the day, knowledge in your head is dead. If it's in pen, it can be read, coached, and implemented. They need to see it. So we call it a unique transformation protocol, a unique branded system. It's, if you're going to be a thought leader, which many of you are, you have the gifts to change people's lives. It's all about perception, not how intelligent. And you and I also talked prior to this call. It's the doctors in these conventional models. They don't have time to actually teach all those different things. So you got to focus on evaluation, connecting with the patient's treatment. So if you don't have this journey or structure, you can help educate or overcome those limiting beliefs with your patients or show them transformation in there. No matter how brilliant you are, it's going to be hard to translate that into outcomes. And I
Absolutely.
also want to go back to your initial story, because I didn't quite know that about you. And that's where my trauma started. And I want to get, because I know one of your pillars is the brain, and the middle center part of it is I've now learned, and I've been in conventional, functional, cutting edge regenerative. And my trauma was known, my first known one, when I was teased by a teacher horribly, and it ruined me. It wrecked my self-worth, my self-confidence. That's where sports became the only outlet, and then drugs and alcohol would allow me to become the life of the party. So that became my addiction, where my true actually self could come out with drinking and alcohol. And that showed up never being able to get past that, because that was my safety until recently. But I had to go back and get to the brain, to the subconscious, to understand those connections to get to that next place. So I'm excited as we go through this pillars and frameworks, maybe relate some of my shares and my story
Happy to.
as we navigate through that. But thank you for that share. And yes, the point of the story is, if you don't have structure so far, that's the first thing. I had to learn that, and I only learned it probably 5 years ago, created when Lisa Sasovich's mastermind, my 5 pillars of practice success. Personal pillar, the business pillar, marketing and sales pillar, then medical fitness. Even though I believed health coaching, nutrition, exercise was the only solution from managed care to real health care, I recognized the doctors putting that in their office. If they didn't have the first 3 structures, then we could never quite integrate, which was true integrative care. So that's a little bit of context to what you've already covered so far. So thank you for that. So what is that step in your process that you'd say we open up into next?
Well, what we do is I'll show, I'm going to share, I'll keep, this is for people who are just audio only. There is a visual component I'm sharing right now. And for people who want to see like a full presentation I gave, it's at myframeworker.com, where I give a full PowerPoint presentation, video recorded, and you can also get access to the actual notes here of how to framework your content. So I don't want this to be just you hear about it and it's nice, isn't that interesting? Like, there's actual resources that I've created for people.
Wonderful.
Myframeworker.com. And people, like practitioners in particular, like they want more time for life and business, but also for personal self-care. That's huge. They want, doctors are teachers, innately, and we want to scale our knowledge. And we have a lot of debt to pay off and a lot of things to fund, but there's also this issue of legacy. We want to know we've made an impact. And some of the challenges that people have had without a framework have been just repeating oneself, being stuck in the business, and not really finding a way to feel like you're a proper vehicle for what you want to teach. And the other thing that's an issue is that, particularly people like myself, is that we tend to overwhelm clients with too much information. And a framework will actually pull back the fire hose a bit, just kind of shrink the aperture of information just a bit. And it will give breathing space for not only you, but also the client to be able to learn what you're trying to teach. And I'm going to share the 6 different models, frameworks, and also illustrate my models along the way. And I'll show you how frameworks developed. So this is the triangle of health, which was developed by D.D. Palmer, who was the founder of chiropractic in 1895. And the triangle was trauma, toxins, and thoughts: the physical, the chemical, and the mental, emotional. Now, for 1895, 125 years ago, that's a pretty brilliant model. I mean, that for 125 years ago, that's brilliant. When I was in chiropractic school, I said, no, it's not a triangle, it's a Venn diagram. It's 3 intersecting circles. That the physical, the biochemical, not just chemical, and the mental, emotional, they intersect with each other. They're not separate rigid lines like a triangle. Then I got into neurology, like big time. And I put the brain smack in the middle, because the brain is actually the boardroom of all the inputs from chemical, biochemical, physical, mental, emotional inputs. And if you want to pick a part of the brain anatomy, it's the hypothalamus. That would be, if you were to pick one boardroom, it would be the hypothalamus that interprets all these different signals to, like, are we under threat or not? And then I split up, went further and said, okay, it's a bit vague to tell people, oh, we got to deal with your physical, your biochemical, and your mental, emotional, and your brain bodies. That's super vague in the 21st century. And so I split the physical into three parts: bowel and digestion, body and structure, burst exercise and movement for the physical. Biochemical, I split into three parts: biotoxins, nutrition, breakfast in particular, and routines. And I know there's some controversy around whether you should have breakfast or not if you're an intermittent fasting enthusiast, and I have my comments on that for sure. Then there's the mental, emotional. I split into three parts, which was stressors, hidden infections, and sleep. And then that further got formalized into a better infographic, which is the 10 pillars of health: brain and hormone system, which would be adrenals, thyroid, sex hormones, particularly estrogen poisoning from xenoestrogens. Bowel and digestion is the second pillar. Now that's my sense of humor. Number 2 is bowel. Haha. Number 2. So
Awesome.
I've divided, so you can see from there's 10 pillars. So we're using numbers. There's color coding, the physical pillar. The physical part of the pie that has 3 of the physical pillars is one color. The biochemical portion is another color. The mental, emotional is another color. And there's alliteration: brain, bowel, body, burst, biotoxins, bionutrients, breakfast, bothers, bugs, and bedtime. Now, I could have picked other ones like bedtime is sleep, bugs is symbiosis, bothers is stressors, breakfast is starting meal, bionutrients is sustenance, biotoxins is synthetics, burst training is speed training, body is structure, and bowel is this a family-friendly podcast? Can I say?
It's all good. I love the alliteration.
Yeah, you could take the bowel is shit as opposed to like you can pick whatever. And brain is not brain, it's synapse. So it's picking. I'm just throwing out examples of like alliteration's part of it,
It is, meaning if it's memorable, and this is already a marketing masterclass as well as your system. And I just want to put story and context to this, just to put it into rate. It's Sam Horn says you either got to be one of a kind or first of a kind, incompletely memorable. So if these are not in the words that your consumers, and I know this model goes to consumers, they know what each one of those words are. So science and experts tell, stories and coaches sell and propel. So if you're a doctor and you're communicating science to the world, you're going to lose them. But all these words that people remember, and a personal thing for me based on your story here in my own healing journey is 10. I love that because my number in all sports growing up was 10. My daughter's name is Tenley. So it's a guide-based number for me just on a personal point. But I've been in regenerative in the cutting edge functional clinic. I've coached hundreds of doctors and have the elite people at my hands. I've overcome Lyme's disease. I've had 11 stem cells, 13 surgeries, and I was just re-injuring myself. Now what I know, but every time where I was a little bit sad, you'd go from one doctor to the next, and the MD says the chiropractor's a quack, and the intermittent fasting guy says if you're not vegan, you're not anything, and everybody's fighting in healthcare. And what's sad for me is we are not very good when it comes to chronic pain and disease, and there's not everybody taking the comprehensive approach or knowing how to communicate or share that it is mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. And over the last 2 years, until I address the subconscious, the mental, the emotional, and even the spiritual, even though that I had faith, that has like obliterated almost all of it, even though I was doing half or 3/4, like you mentioned from the beginning, doing well in these other areas, just missing some of these components that you obviously have a fascinating and comprehensive approach here.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I'm hoping people get from this, this is just one of however many models of health. What I'm hoping to share here is that people get is that there's a way, if you can take your information and you make it as a unified model, then literally what will happen is that your client's like, oh, I've been ignoring that piece. Or, oh, I've been totally overdoing that. Or like, and what I see happen in like, whether it's the biohacker world or whatever, is people just fixate on 1 to 3 pillars and just go bananas on that. Well, I mean, unless they're, carnivore diet, then they wouldn't go bananas. What would they go? Buffalo on it? I don't know.
Yes.
Then So so just to illustrate, like with some stories, some examples. So the brain is left-right brain balance. It's hormone system, the adrenal, thyroid, estrogens. Identifying part of my intake when I work with clients is I developed a 10 pillars of health method survey, like 10 to 30 questions per pillar, sometimes a bit more. So we're talking like 200, 300 questions. It's all broken up into each of these 10 pillars. So I can quickly and efficiently identify what pillars are broken, crumbling, which have been sledgehammered. And there's 4 pillars that can be sledgehammered. The other ones, not really. And which ones have been chronically crumbling. And then I can prioritize what pillars to work on first. So for teaching purposes, bedtime is pillar number 10. But for individual prioritization of what people need to do first to get better, improving people's sleep is usually priority 1, 2, or 3. Usually 1.
I love that.
And so for teaching purposes, I put 10 as bedtime as number 10 because it's like the end of the clock, like on the visual here. So like it's near bedtime, 10 o'clock, go to bed by 10 as one example. So again, it's a teaching model, but don't let the teaching model lock you into the clinical application.
Correct. This is for the patient, just like you said.
For the patient, yeah.
Exactly. This is for outcomes, where to put your approach through. And so many people miss that. And that's where a quiz or an evaluation like this and knowing what to explore just versus your perceived, or you have this lab and going there. It's the lifestyle, it's the behaviors, it's the emotion that's going to change the outcome in the first place. So this is brilliant. And I love how you broke that down. This is about the patient journey. And if they come back, let's just say you're a pain management orthopedic, they're like, that stem cell didn't work. Can I ask what you did for number 2 and number 3? Well, I didn't have time for that. Remember what we said, those that get the consistent, predictable outcomes, they're the ones that are going deep and addressing all of what these challenges are. So it's no longer you telling, it's them seeing themselves in the journey and having a real coaching conversation, not a telling or a judgment based. It's just, it's really what you want as a doctor. It's just you didn't have time or didn't understand how to put this framework like you've brilliantly done together.
Yeah, giving a framework will also let clients put their story into the framework. And once you know you've won in the sense that they now got the framework, when they start telling you their story within the context of the framework. Absolutely. Like that's when you know you've won, that they've got it. And so when we talk about brain and hormones, it's like adrenal, like chronic stress, signs of adrenal, thyroid, dozen or so signs of hypothyroid, and then other signs of hyperthyroid, identifying the 8, I found 8 major sources of estrogen poisoning. And it's like just going through the list, identifying, okay, that's brain and hormones, bowel and digestion. Let's look at, are you chewing? Are you pooing? The best supplement on the planet is chewing, because then you absorb what you're putting in your body, like that is the best supplement. That is the best supplement on the planet, is chewing more. And most people don't. And I have a whole pillar. Like I had severe constipation growing up. I couldn't go except once every 3 to 5 days, but I was told that was normal. And that's a complete lie, according to anthropology and people who study the bowel habits of native cultures. It's like the analogy I use is, if you lived in a house with a toilet that didn't flush, how long would you live in that house? And the answer is not very long. Physical body, this is the pillar number 3. This is the physical body. So this is posture, spinal stress, misalignments, head injuries, bad dental work will ruin your life. Genetics. I put genetics in there. Why did I put genetics in body? Because of identical twins. That's why they're identical. The bodies are the same because of their genetics. Now, obviously, genetics is a huge thing, and I have a whole separate spiel and a whole separate area.
The patients don't buy the how. They buy the words that they know, the system, and they don't buy the how. That's what you deliver once they can explain it and understand it. And I want to put one other point to the scalability of the importance of this. the doctors rarely have time if you don't have the education or the system that goes with this. So this would allow a health coach in your model to also be able to follow your system or look at those evaluations
Exactly.
and have those lifestyle conversation. When we're looking at integrated healthcare and models of the future, if you don't have it scalable beyond the physician's knowledge, then you have a job as an independent practitioner. You don't have this vision and the impact that's really capable when you create something just like this.
Absolutely. And the body pillar is also one of the 4 pillars that could be sledgehammered. So I was in neurology class in chiropractic school, and one of my instructors did a lot of litigation work as an expert witness. And he said that most car insurance companies want to settle big accidents as soon as possible because most of the neurological symptoms onset 2 years later, because it's about 2 years when the body has used up all of its resources nutritionally to deal with the chronic inflammation and problems that come from a major accident. So the insurance companies want to settle as quickly as possible. I'm literally sitting in that class in 2005. And I thought to myself, as he was saying this, I wonder if that's true for not just a physical head-on collision, but also a chemical head-on collision and an emotional head-on collision. And not only was that true in practice, that biotoxins, the toxic pillar, you can be sledgehammer, major toxic exposure. Not only was it true in the bothers pillar, where stressors, emotional stress, a parent dies, a kid dies, you get fired, a divorce, a lot, whatever it is, that's a sledgehammer. But there was also an infectious sledgehammer, bugs, the Lyme's disease as an example, mold as an example. That the physical body, the biotoxin, the stress pillar, bothers pillar, and that's called the bothers pillar, and the bugs or hidden infections pillar. Those are the 4 pillars that can be sledgehammered. You can miss a night of sleep. That's not a sledgehammer. That you can not poop for 3 days. That's not a sledgehammer. You can skip exercise for a week. That's not a sledgehammer. Like the other stuff that don't really get sledgehammered, but physical, chemical exposure, stressors, and infections, those you can be sledgehammered. And the reason I bring this up is because most people who present with chronic debilitating issues, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune, stubborn weight that just can't get off, severe hormone imbalance, whatever it is, I found clinically that the pattern was this: they've had 5, 6, 7, 8 pillars that were crumbling chronically over time. And then within 2 years of the major onset, they had 1 to 2 sledgehammers. And it was the chronic crumbling plus a sledgehammer or 2 within 2 years of onset of the major chronic debilitating symptoms. And so that's why I bring up the issues of sledgehammers, is because you have to go back, find out where the sledgehammer was, and go back to and find out where their symptoms onset that's really debilitating. Then go back within 2 years, plus or minus, find the sledgehammer. And that has been pure clinical gold in trying to figure out what's going on.
Makes sense. Even to my collapse and burnout where it happened, where it was undiagnosed Lyme's disease and maybe even a mold exposure, which even in some of the recent tests is still there. So it makes great sense.
Yeah. And with a model, I never thought of the sledgehammers until like I actually was made this version. And so then what you'll see as a clinician is that you'll see models within your own model, and your ability to become clinically even better once you have a framework will just skyrocket, because now you have a framework to which to think when you're talking with a client. You're now filtering it through your own framework constantly. And then patterns begin to emerge for the client's benefit. The 4th pillar is burst and movement. So that's exercise, movement. Exercise can be a trigger word for a lot of clients and patients. So I say movement instead. And so it's quality, duration, repetition. You have variability. There's also, I have an article which I diplomatically titled on my blog, Why Marathoners Look Like Cancer Patients. And I grew up outside Heartbreak Hill, and it's all in there, but there's a reason why marathoners look like cancer patients. And I don't endorse long-term jogging. I'm marathoning because of the chronic cortisol release. And that's people who are interested in reading that, they can go to my blog and search for that. Biotoxins is the 5th pillar. This is a very sad pillar because it's only going to get much worse before it gets any better. So it's everything that's air pollution, water pollution, food pollution, the solvents, off-gassing, preservatives, makeups, all all the things. That's the toxin pillar. Its opposite is bionutrients, which is everything you need to be healthy. So amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals. I also include oxygen and sunlight because you metabolize those. Those are part of the metabolism, and we kind of miss those a lot.
So breathing goes in there.
Yeah, exactly. Oxygen and sunlight. But those are two things that people don't consider as nutrients, and they are. The whole reason we breathe is for oxygen.
Yeah.
So breakfast was an odd one. This is breakfast and routines. And I found that 99%, actually counted, 99+% of all my clients who had chronically ill issues had either bad breakfast or skipped breakfast. Now I know it's going to raise the hackles of the intermittent fasters out there, and I'm okay with that. But I don't people think you should skip breakfast because that would spike their cortisol response. They should skip dinner. That's what I think people should do. Now, and again, this is confronting, and I'm okay with that. A lot of people who promote the skip breakfast are 20 to 40 plus financially solvent tech entrepreneur males. I'm dealing with
grind.
Yeah. And when they've had the high cortisol spike from skipping breakfast, they get a lot of shit done. Like they feel great. My clinical bias, because of my patient base and client base, is mostly middle-aged, burnt-out females. Mostly, not all. Mostly. I mean, I work with, have like international lawyer, when he's all into stop the clock and longevity, and I love working with these people too. But the majority of my practice has been burnt out middle-aged females, and skipping breakfast is a really bad idea for them. And my first ebook was on that. And so I want people to have a nourishing, fulfilling, non-glorified sugar-based breakfast. And it was one of the fastest way to help these people feel better, just feel better the next day, is to start having a solid breakfast. And routines, especially morning and evening, those are so critical to bookend the day. Bothers, pillar number 8, is for stressors: emotional, financial, cultural, business. Clutter is a stress. Marie Kondo and her life-changing magic of tidying up. Watching the news is a stressor. Electromagnetic fields for certain people are stressors. They're affected by it. Bugs is a hidden infection. So it's limes, mold. And I run stool tests all the time. I know, looking at whether it's blastocystis for people who have a autoimmune reaction to thyroid. I look for blastocystis. I look for Yersinia. I look for a couple other things. Like there's hidden infections even in Western worlds. You can run. I look at stool tests all day. Like there's plenty of hidden infections. Bedtime is sleep: quality, duration, consistency, and depth. I was a severe insomniac for 12 years. My next book that I'm working on for Kindle is on sleep. So this is the 10 pillars of health. And it's the main natural health framework that I use. And it accounts for several of the different types of models that you see in creating frameworks. So when I'm looking at, I'll just jump right, numbers. So there's, to make frameworks, that one of the first models is numbers, the 10 pillars of this, the 4 R's by Dr. Bland, the 4 Freedoms by Dan Sullivan, the 4 Questions by the work of Byron Katie, the 6 E's of Leadership by Brendan Burchard, the 12 Channels of Chinese Medicine, the 12 Steps of AA, etc. Then there's
practice success.
Yeah, exactly. So then alliteration, I use brain, bowel, body, burst, etc. Jeff Bland uses remove, replace, repair, rebalance. Alliteration is a lot of fun. It's a little difficult, but it's kind of fun. My part of my framework for my Tame the Beast of Addiction involves alliteration. Each phase of how you resolve each part of that 5 cycle to deal with addiction is an R. Resolve the underlying stress relief. Resilience. Restrict, remove, replace. Reverse the damage. Reach out for help. That's alliteration. Then
can we go through? Can we come back to that one after you go back? Because I just want to walk through my story.
We're going to come back to the. Okay. We're going to come to the addiction model. No, yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to go through the 6 frameworks, and you'll see how the addiction model uses basically all of them at the same time. Then there's colors. So in genetics work, you have the traffic light system: the green dot, yellow dot, red dot. You have in Chinese medicine, all that chart in the lower left corner. The Chinese medicine, they've got the 5 elements of different colors. That chart I made when when making a framework out of Dr. Tan's balance method. A little, for the acupuncturists who are listening, if you Google Dr. Tan's balance method on image search on Google's, you'll see my chart is usually image number 1 to number 3 in the world, because that chart basically summarizes 1,000 years of Chinese medicine theory into one page. That's practical. You can use with Dr. Tan's theories. The colors are extremely useful to help people track where they are in the particular framework. Clustering is another framework. So what you see in functional testing is you cluster. There's the fatty acid metabolites. Here's the carbohydrate metabolites. When I do my genetics analysis, I don't chase after an individual inflammatory gene. That's a little bit bonkers to me from functional genetics standpoint. I look at clusters. Do they have a problem initiating inflammation with a cluster of the major genes that do that? Do they overpropagate inflammation with the clusters there? Do they have problem extinguishing inflammation with like the interleukin 10s? So clustering is a way to have a framework where you're looking for patterns and you make it overt in like, we're looking for this chunk, and this chunk, and not getting lost too much in the trees, and because we're looking for patches of forest. Then there's acronyms. Acronyms arguably is the hardest one to do. This is hard because the acronym has to be emotionally salient to the purpose of the framework.
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I've had this, and I try to do this unique branded transformational protocol with our doctors. And I was working with one doctor, Dr. Kaylee Butwell, and she was like, we're just having a conversation. And it's like, pain management is such a cop-out. I don't want to give it to myself. And I was like, well, what do your patients really want? What would you really want? I want a pain resolution plan. And I was like, yes, there's the name of your outcome, your book title, the pain resolution plan. And then the acronym PLAN, prescriptions and procedures, lifestyle and learning. So she could give her people there, activity and age defense, nutrition and next step. It fit her integrated model when she was able to do a treatment plan. So we have an intake form, much like you said, that allows in a quiz that allows people to see which area needs greater support. And then the treatment plan at the end, based on the intake, what they've done and not done, then she can prescribe a plan. And it all contextually, once on paper, makes sense to the patient. And it's so much easier to do content behind. So it is tricky to make that there. But treatment plan is a multi-universal word that people understand. So that made it easy, but yes, difficult for a lot of systems.
Acronym. So just as a technical piece, acronym is condensing something into a physical word. The PRP, or what you described, that's an abbreviation. So it's the same concept. It's like, can you shorten something into something that's easy to memorize that captures like this massive field of information?
Plan is not an acronym?
Say it again?
Plan wouldn't be an acronym?
Oh, I thought you said PRP, and you were describing my pain relief. Oh, plan's definitely an acronym. Sorry.
Yeah.
I misheard. I thought you were taking pain resolution program, and my mind got stuck on PRP. So plan is absolutely an acronym. That
is a common, one of those procedures that we have in the plan was PRP.
I know, PRP is, okay, got it. Yeah, so plan is absolutely an acronym. Yeah. My addiction model is Tame the Beast. Tame is an acronym for when you're looping in the addiction cycle. It stands for T, take a breath. A, that's a pause, take a breath. A is acknowledge you're in the cycle. M is make the decision to exit the cycle. And E is exit the cycle. And how you exit depends on where you're stuck in the cycle. And that's going to the other acronym of BEAST, BEAST. The beast of addiction. Again, so beast, the emotional salience of it is a beast on one's back. I believe a stressful thought. This is how literally every single addiction loop starts. I have never found an exception to date of any addict of any substance anywhere ever. I know it's a really bold statement, but I am yet to be proven wrong. So all addictions begin with B, I believe a stressful thought. He, she hurt me. He, she betrayed me. The world is unsafe. The world is unfair. I have to make a decision. There's not enough time. There's too much to do. I'm bored. To name, just like the top 7. And then when I B, believe a stressful thought, then I E, have an emotional, physical stress response. anxiety, nervousness, stress, anger, fear, grief, rage, jealousy,
Yes. Yeah.
physical pain, tension, stress, whatever it is, then I want to anesthetize, numb out with a vice. Drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, work, reading, watching the news, video games, sugar, chocolate. Some would argue chocolate's a food group, not an addiction, but whatever. Whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There's the vice is step 3, not step 1. It's downstream. The root is the belief systems that are triggering the emotional response that then people reach for a vice to numb out. Then there's S in beasts, which is they smolder in the consequences. So smolder is a 7-letter acronym. It's an acronym within an acronym of the 7 types of damage that are done based on the vice. And the damage done varies wildly based on the vice, varies wildly on the individual circumstance on the vice, and it varies wildly based on the culture in which the vice is used. So the S in smolder is societal consequences. Now, if you drink in a Mormon or you're in a Sharia law country, that's not societally a great thing to do. But if you're in Russia, Northern European, Australia, New Zealand, drinking is a national sport. Okay. So it's society matters of where you do your workaholism is celebrated in the United States. It's shunned in New Zealand, where you're called a tryhard and a tall poppy. And I can say that because I lived in New Zealand for 8 years. So the society matters. M is monetary consequences. Gambling has one set of monetary consequences. Workaholism has another. O is occupational, or depending if you're young, educational consequences. So how your addiction affects your job. So if you're
baseball, yes. So I want to tell all the stories through this. Just like you said, when you have a structure like this, people can see themselves in it. Yeah. It's just like I got kicked out of my senior year of baseball, came my biggest pain in my life. They went on to win a state championship. So in school, not kosher to do that.
Yeah.
Crazy, yeah.
Occupational, like Wolf of Wall Street, cocaine and hookers are part of the game, but that's part of that's the addictions are somewhat tacitly endorsed.
Yeah.
Where other things you do will get you fired or kicked out of school or whatever. L is legal consequences. There are no legal consequences to food addiction. None. There are definitely legal consequences to alcohol and drug addiction. And again, that's also societally based on where you are. D is domestic consequences. What's your home life based on your addiction? And I made that distinct from the relationships, which is the last one. We'll get to that in a bit. But because if you're like living alone, you're like the teenage kid who's got a shrine for a computer, but everything else is a disaster in the home, or what's your domestic life like? E is your energy/health consequences. What is your, are you an exercise addict? Are you an orthorexic nervosa? You're a health food addict? Are you addicted to Kit Kats? Like I was. R is relationships consequences. And of all the different smolder, the different categories, relationships is the most consistent across all addictions in terms of how they get messed up. That is the one thing that is the most consistent of the smolder in terms of damage done, regardless of the society, regardless of the vice.
Oh my goodness. This is so brilliant, Sam. I hope you're incredibly proud of it. I mean, this is a meaningful topic to me. I've had an addiction, one form, my whole life from that traumatic experience. And it was sports. Then it went to pot and alcohol, where pot my whole life, to chewing through baseball and all the sports. And that was the only way I couldn't do pot. Then work became another addiction, fell in love with it. And it's been a lifelong journey. Like, I've been driven to make an impact in healthcare and have success, whether that was significance or ego driven at one point in time versus now in my heart, is I had to get past those subconscious blocks. I continue to have these reoccurring cycles because I wasn't managing emotions or being in these stressful thoughts. And pot was what was the final one, and it could cause major problems as a high school. Like I said, getting kicked off a base, I didn't get fired from it because everybody knew I was a damn good worker and I was creating income in there. So I didn't get fired for pot, and I owned my businesses, right? So at the end of the day, there wasn't there, but my wife and I, it was a 10-year fight and challenge. And
Yeah.
believe it or not, over the last 10 years of degeneration, like I mentioned, it wasn't until I left and addressed the physical or the emotional and spiritual and energetic components.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to get into plant medicine and hypnosis to get past the subconscious blocks. And for the first time in my life, I have no substance. Chew gone, because every time I'd quit pot for a little bit, I'd need to go back to chew, even though I hadn't done it for 8 years because I wanted to save my marriage. But it was how I could numb. And I always said, well, I'm not playing video games all night. Why can't I just do this to go to sleep and shut off this crazy mind? So even though it was medicinal at points, but there was truth, I was numbing and blocking emotions. And I wanted to be able to be a master of my own destiny, to fulfill my calling. So it was like, I'm going to get rid of everything. And I actually needed what society will look at from some, these plant wisdoms, or what you want to call it, drugs or substance. I actually needed them. Maybe I didn't need them. They came to me to absolutely eliminate every addiction I had.
I want to touch on that because, plant medicine is very popular mechanism right there to address things in addiction. I just want to share where plant medicine fits. Like, I don't have plant medicine specifically in my model. My model is a meta model for all different approaches to addiction. I can literally take, again, big statement, I can take literally any other model of addiction and insert it into mine. I can put 12-step in here. I could put horse therapy in here. I could put plant medicine in here, because I'll show you in a minute where the resolutions are. What I wanted was a meta model of addiction. So these different addiction camps just stop fighting with each other and we can start collaborating.
Yes.
Like seriously, like addiction's too big of a problem to have everyone competing over the little fiefdom, over their precious little piece of, we treated this is what works. No, it's nonsense. It's a collaborative, complex issue of addiction, and we need to synergize all the different approaches and have one unified model that can show where every piece can work and where it also can break down and where the other pieces can fill in the gaps. So that was the intention of my model. It's a meta model. The T in Beast is having terrible, stressful thoughts after the smolder of the consequences. So this is, we started with the believing the stressful thoughts, like, he, she hurt me, he, she betrayed me, I'm bored, the world is unsafe, the world is unfair, there's too much to do, there's not enough time, etc. Yeah. I have an emotional, physical stress response, anxiety, nervousness, anger, rage, etc. I reach for an anesthesia. I then smolder in the consequences. I picked the word smolder because emotionally, that's what it feels like after a bender, like this below burn.
Regret,
inside.
Shame, yes, smolder, fire, your body's hurting.
And the shame is actually in the terrible thoughts. That's the shame is the next step. So the terrible thoughts after the smolder is, I'm a piece of shit. I hurt my job, my career, my family, my health. I'm worthless. I'm bad. I'm terrible. And if I believe that, then I have an emotional, physical stress response, and they have reached for something, and it spins around and around. Couple key points. It's beyond key. It's actually the pivotal. The thoughts that initiate addiction are not the same thoughts that perpetuate addiction. I'm going to say that again. The thoughts that initiate addiction are not the same thoughts that perpetuate them. Okay? A lot of addiction models fixate on the terrible thoughts. Shame, I'm a bad person, I'm this, I ruined this. They need to back up, go through the other steps to find the root belief systems. That's so critical. The root belief. Now, going right to plant medicine, what does plant medicine do? For some people, if it's safe, if it's the right person, the right time, there's 1,000 asterisks at the end of plant medicine. It is playing with fire. It is really, really requires supervision. Do not take this casually.
It's not your college buddies tripping mushrooms like I did. That was fun, but it wasn't what my last year and a half's been at all.
Oh my God, no. So what does plant medicine do? One, it can do, I should say. It can identify and resolve the underlying belief systems. Whether it's working with the default mode network or whatever neurological stuff is coming out of Baylor or whatever, it can do that. It can also increase your resilience, because certain plant medicine can really shift your biochemistry in a beneficial way if it's done right. So when the ways to address the 5 phases or deal with the belief systems is you resolve the underlying stressful beliefs, whether it's through plant medicine, the work of Byron Katie, internal family systems, cognitive behavioral therapy, constellation therapy, family, whatever. I'm a pragmatist. What works? What works? That's what I care about. I prefer the work of Byron Katie because it's the single most straightforward, scalable, accessible, non-denominational. It's just like 4 questions and a turnaround. Anyone can do it. It's a piece of paper, and you or a facilitator. It's super straightforward, and I'm open to all of the things that work. That's what I want. What works? The second phase, when you're dealing with the emotional physical stress response, that's about resilience. That's functional medicine. How is it that some people can have all the same stressful belief systems, but they don't develop addictions? Because they have enough resilience to not feel overwhelming anxiety or nervousness to feel a need to grab for an addictive thing. So we increase resilience by doing functional medicine by using the, wait for it, 10 pillars of health.
Yes.
So the addiction framework is actually a super framework that under which the 10 pillars is underneath. So you have frameworks within frameworks. So I use the 10 pillars of health for phase 2 for building up resilience. That's where functional testing, genetic predispositions and addictions come in. Fits perfectly. You can be genetically vulnerable to addictions, which fits under the rubric of resilience.
Brilliant.
So third phase, with the vice itself, drinking, drugs, video games, food, whatever. This is where you learn how to restrict, remove, and replace the vice. Restricting means restricting access to the people, places, and time of day that you're exposed to the vice. There's your drinking buddies, your smoking buddies, your gaming buddies. Whether do you drive by I have one client where the sugar was kept in the purse, another was kept at the desk at work, another was driving by that one store on the way home from work. So I said, take a different route home. Oh,
brain knows those, yes.
Yeah. Restrict access, people, places, time of day, circumstance. Remove is physically removing the vice from your circumstance. And then replace is you substitute it temporarily for a less damaging vice. Now, that's different from cross-addicting. Cross-addicting is where you switch from alcohol to sugar and you spin in the same direction. Replacing is I'm going to temporarily switch alcohol for something else in order to consciously buy time to work on my resilience and work on my underlying belief systems. You're going in the other direction of the cycle.
I did that. Every time I saw pot, I would stop chew because I knew that this was ultimately for my relationship. My wife didn't care about that. Back to your relationship. That was the replacement. And it's just like, okay. So that even on my last rendition before it was all gone, it was pot to chew for a week while I was doing the yoga, the meditation, the breath work, the plant, the microdosing to build that resilience back up, and then boom, gone.
Yeah. So you've replacing versus cross-addicting is a very key distinction. It's about intent and direction of where you're going. And replacing can look like cross-addicting, but the intent is completely different.
Which AA to give up the alcohol. Here's the sugars. Here's the cookie. Here's the coffee.
Yeah. So AA is really great at removing and restricting access to alcohol, but there's a risk of cross-addicting to like exercise, even meetings, and sugar. And AA can really work, like truly work, if it really does resolve the underlying stressful beliefs. But if it doesn't, it really then can just at best function as a stabilizer to keep people from blackout violent alcoholism, which is not nothing. That is not nothing.
Brilliant. One of the most successful things of all world. It's just sometimes not enough.
The stabilization is not cure. That's the thing people need to realize. Stabilization is not cure. And so I want to account for where AA works also fits in this model, and where it doesn't quite work also fits in this model. Smolder is where we reverse the damage. You go through each of the 7 things. It's like, there's many models that have this. It's basically going through and making, when you want to call it making amends or whatever it might be. And then phase 5, when you have terrible thoughts like I'm a piece of shit, I'm a bad person, I did this, I have shame. This is when you reach out for help. Whether it's for I'm the AA folks, like I'm helpless in the name of my addiction, I need help, or you reach out. I actually have a criteria of who you reach out to and who you don't reach out to for your help with addiction. And the community. The community is huge here. The family structure is here. Because if you pull someone out of an addictive environment, help them, but then put them right back into the environment where the addiction was rendered, it's going to be problematic. So that's the 10, this is the Tame the Beast framework. Now, as you can see, it's incorporating geometry, colors, alliteration, acronyms. I think the only one it's like, as I think is maybe it's clustering. If you want to cluster together
And you have the cluster right there.
The clustering of the 7 types of consequences. Like this is kind of my masterpiece, you know? And this is also, you can do this too. There's these different types of frameworks. And if people want help in making their frameworks, like go to myframeworker.com, watch the full video, and you can download the notes from there. I think you have to like opt in to get the notes or something. And if people want my personal help in constructing your frameworks, this comes naturally to me.
It is.
Where I can help you put your framework together so you can go scale your impact and your income.
You guys see that, right? This gentleman right here is a true genius and a brilliant visionary to be able to weave these, to understand these in this concept. So if you perceive and you want to be a thought leader and you want to be on a stage someday, you can't afford to not do this part, because it's not just about marketing and sales. That's what you guys don't like. This is about the outcomes, the impact, the scalability of it. And I went deep work, but it's not to this level at all. So it's like I have a general understanding of this. He's a true intellectual genius when it comes to this work. So if you do have that big concept, that idea, and you know you are meant for more, then this would be the greatest value you could do to really impact humanity, in my point. So thank you so much. And I want to end with the story, and I'll let you finish and close out.
I gotta run.
So basically, I was in sports. Love to hear your story. So basically, I was in sports, competing my whole life, and it was always beat the other team. And my first college rugby game, right, is you still want to beat the other team and impose your will. At the end of the game, we hosted a barbecue for the other team. And then an hour later, we're holding hands and singing songs and drinking beers, and we're all high-fiving the teams. And I learned what co-opetition was. Rugby was a brotherhood. And if we look at healthcare, the end all be all of it has its place. All of it has its tools. But all you have to do is evaluate. Is it working? And if it's not, that patient's sitting in front of you, then they need more. And continue to pass them on their journey. Don't let ego get in the way of health and changing the world. It's co-opetition that is going to change the world, in collaboration. Even though competition's fun and can get you places, it's doctors like Dr. Shay that really get this big framework. And thank you so much. So how would they contact you? How would they reach out to you?
Sure. For the frameworking content, it's myframeworker.com, all one word. If they want to look at the clinical side, if people are interested in working with me as a client to help them with whether it's their health concern or addictive issues, it's just drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. I've been on lots of podcasts. I've been on summits. Like I've got over 80 videos on YouTube. 4 free ebooks now. I can't remember. My website. There's I've got a lot of information out there. I love teaching. I love sharing. And I look forward to helping you in whatever way I can, whether it's with your personal health journey or it's with constructing your framework.
You're a genius, my friend, and continue that impact, continue to stay in your heart and impact the world. Haven't met too many people like you, and to get that marketing and concept and be a clinician of that side and make it understandable. True brilliance right here, everybody. So whether you're a doctor and want to break your thought leader, if you're listening as a consumer, what do you got to lose but everything if you're not where you want to be? So health is everything, my friends. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Wow. I learned a lot today. That was freaking great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to share with your audience. Like it's like you're a scaler. And I'm so appreciative to scalers. Like my work would be lost in the dark if it wasn't for people like you.
Thank you. Looking forward to helping you scale this, because this is, legit, everybody. Legit is legit come. So thank you.